If you've watched the lectures on antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy, and if you haven't, you should go do that first before starting on this video, you'll know that while ASPD cannot be diagnosed before the age of 18, the initial pattern of bad behavior almost always began during childhood and adolescence. The DSM has a chapter on disruptive, impulse control, and conduct disorders that provides various diagnoses to describe these patterns when they occur in childhood, including oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, and disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. These disorders are also sometimes called externalizing disorders. As we learned in the video on ASPD, externalizing disorders occur when the patient takes their negative emotions out on the external environment through aggression and violence, rather than directing them inward towards the self, which would instead result in internalizing disorders like depression and anxiety. When learning about externalizing disorders, it can be helpful to know what you're looking for to help differentiate one diagnosis from another. The mnemonic, "Every child is special," will remind you to evaluate 4 things when looking at disruptive behaviors: the emotion associated with them, whether they are consistent or episodic, the intention behind them, and finally, how severe they are. Let's apply this scheme to each of these disorders. First, oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, is an externalizing disorder defined by a pattern of argumentativeness, vindictiveness, and defiance of parents, teachers, and other authority figures, resulting in frequent arguing, temper tantrums, and rule breaking. There is a significant emotional component to ODD, with persistent anger and irritability helping to drive recurrent antisocial behavior. These behaviors are both consistent and purposeful, as they are done regularly with the explicit goal of frustrating or defying others. However, they are not severe to the point where they cross the line into violation of others' rights, and stop short of overt violence, aggression, or theft, which helps to differentiate it from conduct disorder, which we'll discuss next. ODD is relatively common, with estimates placing the prevalence at around 3% of children. The average age of onset is around 6 to 8 years old, although these patterns often continue on into adolescence. There is a gender gap seen in ODD, with around 2 boys diagnosed for every 1 girl. The prognosis for ODD is actually fairly good, with 70% of children diagnosed with the disorder no longer having patterns of it as an adult. Treatment involves working with the family both as a unit, as in family therapy, and individually, with psychotherapy and behavioral training for the child and education on behavioral principles for the caregivers. There is little evidence that medications are effective for treating ODD in the absence of any comorbid disorders like ADHD. Next, conduct disorder is like ODD in that the antisocial behavior is both consistent, rather than intermittent, and purposeful, rather than impulsive. The underlying emotions of anger and irritability are also shared with ODD in most cases. However, where conduct disorder distinguishes itself from ODD is in the severity of the behavior, as it goes beyond the arguments and outbursts seen in ODD into the realm of violating the rights of others, at a level not seen in any other externalizing disorder, including threats, property damage, fire setting, robbery, fights, violence, physical cruelty, and sexual coercion. Conduct disorder is more rare than ODD, with estimates placing it at around 1 to 2% of children. Almost all patients with the diagnosis showed signs by the age of 10, although some children will start with ODD and then progress to conduct disorder over time. The gender gap is even wider for conduct disorder than ODD, with around 3 or 4 males diagnosed for every 1 female. Perhaps unsurprisingly, conduct disorder is the most likely of all externalizing disorders to turn into ASPD in adulthood, with up to 40% of children with this disorder progressing to ASPD. However, that still means that over half of children will not develop ASPD, so do not think of this as a lifelong sentence in every case. Treatment is similar to ODD, with both patient-level strategies such as behavioral modification, as well as systems-level interventions like parent training and family therapy being helpful, although unfortunately often to a much lesser extent than with ODD. Medications are generally not helpful for this condition. Next, intermittent explosive disorder, or IED, involves a recurrent pattern of disruptive behaviors, including screaming, hitting, kicking, and throwing tantrums. As highlighted by the word intermittent in the name, these behaviors tend to occur in discrete episodes, each lasting no more than an hour. Importantly, they often occur in response to external events in a way that seems out of proportion to how most children would react, such as kicking and punching after being told that they cannot have candy. While these tantrums are immediately accompanied by intense feelings of anger and irritability, in between episodes, mood returns to normal, in contrast to the persistent anger seen in ODD and conduct disorder. Indeed, many children with IED express remorse about their actions once they have calmed emotionally, in contrast to people with ODD or conduct disorder who are more likely to believe that they were justified in their actions. The severity of antisocial behavior also does not rise to the level of premeditated violence and destruction that is seen in a conduct disorder. IED is more common than either ODD or conduct disorder, with about 5% of children and adolescents meeting criteria for the diagnosis at some point in their life. The age of onset is later than for either of those disorders as well, with the average age being in early adolescence around 13 years old, although some younger children will develop it as well. The gender ratio is also not quite as pronounced as with conduct disorder, with only a 2-to-1 ratio of males to females. Because it is rooted in personality characteristics like impulsivity and a tendency towards negative emotion, IED is often a lifelong condition, although the severity does tend to decrease with age. Treatment involves both behavioral interventions to improve distress tolerance and impulse control, as well as family therapy to address systems-level dynamics. Medications play a larger role in treating IED compared to ODD or conduct disorder, with several studies showing that serotonin-boosting medications can be helpful. However, the effect size of medication is overall quite limited, so behavioral and family therapy should be the first-line options whenever possible. Finally, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, or DMDD, appears similar to IED on first glance. The antisocial behaviors occur in intermittent episodes that seem out of proportion to the situation that provoked them. They are not quite as severe as in conduct disorder, and they are highly impulsive in nature rather than being purposeful or premeditated, with patients often expressing remorse after the fact. The key difference here is that, while patients with DMDD only engage in disruptive behaviors on an intermittent basis, they experience negative emotions like irritability, sadness, and anger consistently, even between outbursts. So it is the emotion that differs most between IED and DMDD, with the latter featuring chronic negative emotion, even if the outbursts are only intermittent. DMDD is a relatively new diagnosis, so there isn't as much information on its epidemiology and prognosis compared to the other externalizing disorders we've discussed so far. Treatment studies are also limited, although the evidence that does exist suggests that psychotherapy, including behavioral management and parent training, is more effective than medications. However, because DMDD involves persistent negative emotions, it is possible that medications like antidepressants can be effective in some cases as well. So those are the 4 externalizing disorders to be aware of. A couple of notes before we finish. First, diagnosing an externalizing disorder must be done with significant caution, as it usually involves someone other than the identified patient saying that there's a problem. This contrasts with something like depression, where it's typically the identified patient themselves who decides to seek clinical attention because they feel that something is wrong. Because there's often a power differential between the identified patient and the adult bringing them in for clinical attention, these diagnoses run the risk of characterizing all disruptive or challenging behaviors as being indicative of individual psychiatric pathology, rather than recognizing contributions from other factors. Indeed, disruptive behaviors have many possible causes, including being illogical, though not necessarily adaptive, response to stresses and injustices in one's home, school, or society as a whole. For example, many children living in foster care or group homes end up being diagnosed with ODD, yet many of these cases resolve when the child is placed in a more stable living arrangement. By assigning a diagnosis, it's easy to get the impression that the problem lies entirely within the patient, when, in reality, they may simply be the most vulnerable person in a complex system of inequality and dysfunction. Second, while we have made a distinction between externalizing disorders like ODD, IED, and DMDD, and internalizing disorders like anxiety and depression, the fact of the matter is that externalizing and internalizing disorders are not mutually exclusive, and most people with an externalizing disorder will also have an internalizing disorder, although the reverse is not true, with only a minority of people with internalizing disorders also having an externalizing disorder. While externalizing behaviors are often the biggest concern for the family, it is the internalizing symptoms that are more likely to be distressing to the patient. Therefore, never let the presence of externalizing behaviors distract you from looking for internalizing symptoms as well. Finally, many children with externalizing disorders have a history of trauma, with early life neglect and exposure to violence being particularly common. As mentioned in the video on PTSD, textbook PTSD is rare in children exposed to trauma before the age of 10, who instead tend to manifest their trauma in other ways. One of these ways is through externalizing disorders, so taking a trauma history in these patients can help to increase not only your understanding of, but also your empathy towards these often challenging cases. Thanks for watching this video. This rounds out our 3-video series on causes of disruptive and antisocial behavior in patients. If you'd like to test your knowledge of what we learned so far, consider checking out my book, Memorable Psychiatry, for lots of practice questions. Subscribing to my channel also helps a lot. Until next time, thanks for watching.